Welcome to the Aid Market Podcast, where foreign aid partners connect to learn about key funding trends and market insight. The podcast is co-hosted by Aid Connect Data, the pipeline and market intel software for USAID partnering, and Connected International, the leading USAID partnering support consulting firm. Now, here's your host, Mike Shanley.
Hello and welcome to the Aid Market Podcast. Very excited to have our guest today, Jami Rodgers. Jami's the Senior Procurement Executive, Chief Acquisition Officer, and Director of the Office of Acquisition and Assistance at USAID. Jami he provides senior executive leadership and oversight of USAID's procurement and financial assistance functions, policies, and initiatives to empower over 600 acquisition and assistance professionals to deliver on U.S. foreign assistance development goals worldwide. He most recently served as the director of NASA Headquarters Procurement Strategic Operations Division and as head of the contracting activity for the Exploration Systems Development and Space Operations Mission Directorate at NASA. He co-sponsored the NASA Acquisition Innovation Launchpad to improve operations and reduce barriers to achieve a more diverse and equitable partner base for mission success. Sounds a lot like what USAID is doing on the diversifying the partner base side. So, Jami, with that, welcome to the Aid Market Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, to get started, when you took the position, both with my conversations with staff within USAID and with partners, everyone was very excited to have you take on this role at USAID. And then I saw a DevEx article was, I believe the title was something like, "Can Jami Rodgers fix the contracting crisis at USAID?" So, whether or not that's how you would phrase it, let's start there. As you're coming back to USAID, and didn't note in the bio, it'll be in the show notes, but you worked at USAID previously. What do you see as the current state of contracting, acquisition, and assistance at USAID?
Great. Well, thanks again for the question. And first off, I'm very proud to be back at USAID. I think the mission is more important now than ever, given the many challenges we face in the world. But in the acquisition and assistance, or A&A space, we certainly have some opportunities to improve, as noted in the DevEx article. And I wholeheartedly accept the challenge, but I'm not going to do it alone. That's going to take a team, but I'm encouraged by the support and visibility that internally to USAID and externally to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. So to get to the heart of the matter, staffing is key. Making sure that we have the right team in place to be able to manage our workload will be essential if we're going to make any sort of development gains. Back when I left the agency in 2018, we were at about $15 billion a year. This past fiscal year, we were about $38 billion. Our lines of hiring kind of remained flat. So while we more than doubled the dollars obligated, we didn't really move the needle on the makeup of the team. So number one, I'm in awe of what our team can accomplish as a relatively lean team compared to other government agencies when you look at per capita obligations. Our workforce at USAID is made up of some of the most dedicated professionals I've seen across the 4 agencies I've had the pleasure of serving. So one role that I see is elevating the importance of the acquisition and assistance workforce. So this past March, we celebrated National Procurement Month. Not many people know it's such a thing, but it does exist, where we did daily kudos. And with the support of our Deputy Administrator for Management and Resources at the time, we launched A&A Accelerate in April, which is really an initiative to focus on the workforce, focus on our hiring needs. And it's been met with a lot of passion and excitement. We have 4 sorts of areas that we're looking. The first is rebuilding the workforce, making sure that we're retaining and recruiting and filling gaps to fix our staffing shortage. We've taken some novel approaches to that. We had our first in-person career fair where we had several hundred folks come in person to try to quicken the hiring process. And we're also working with Fayetteville State to do a pilot acquisition workforce program to get undergrads and grad students in the pipeline so that we aren't just shuffling the deck chairs and moving 1102s from agency to agency to really build up the future workforce. So that's our primary focus on that challenge that folks have highlighted. The next, given our issues and hotspots in many parts of the world, we're trying to increase our surge capacity so that teams can respond and be matrixed to crises as they pop up and as the support is needed. The third prong of our ANA Accelerate initiative is making sure that we have increased mission capacity by continuing to elevate our FSN colleagues. I've often referred to our FSNs as the glue that holds our operations together as folks rotate around from post to post. So making sure that their critical contributions to our work are highlighted and made known. And on that last part, beyond FSNs, our entire workforce, I think we need to expand our professional development opportunities so that we can continue to build skills and grow folks as leaders. Here in Washington, we have a Build a Leader program. And in other parts of the world, we offer technical training as well as the soft skills that are so important in terms of how we lead our teams, how we collaborate, how we influence decision-making from the ANA backstop, and just drive continuous improvement. I think it's really important that we not rest on our laurels as we try to get better. So as we're looking at the challenges that face the workforce, I've asked our folks to look at opportunities to streamline and improve how we do business. And that includes, burden reduction efforts and reducing barriers. So a lot to work on, a lot of opportunity, but again, so proud to be back to have the privilege to work with a great team.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Jami. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know it's only been a couple months for you, but are some of those areas where you've seen some early progress or imagine you had some ideas when you came in. Now you've been in the role for a few months in terms of what realistically looks like over the next year or two. What of those realistically seem feasible for your team to accomplish?
Sure. I think a lot of that centers around our burden reduction effort. Prior to my arrival and currently, we've done a kind of an internal scrub of what we're looking at to remove sort of things that procedures or processes that don't add a lot of benefit. But we're turning our lens externally, and we've asked our partner base and others who have a vested interest in USAID success to really let us know what's working well and what isn't. What burdens do you still see? And is there a way we can always change policy or guidance or issue sort of flash notices to help streamline operations? So I see a lot of work there. We've saved thousands of hours of time and a lot of money in that. But I see that as something we're going to continue to focus on as we wrap up this fiscal year and beyond into FY25. But we can't do it alone. Our partners need to be telling us sort of what works well and when things aren't working well. We usually hear about that quite a bit, and we're glad to get that feedback and use it constructively. But again, it's a team sport, so we need to hear from our partners so that we can improve how we do business. I always tell the team, there's no monopoly on good ideas. They can come from anywhere and at any level. So we're all ears, and we have a wonderful industry liaison and communications team here in MOAA. I think it's one of the best across government, and they're really the focal point to take all that feedback from industry and make sure we follow up. We've keyed up a number of areas for discussion around policy, given some of our partners' recommendations. So we're kind of mapping out short, middle, and longer term changes we either need to make to policy. Maybe it's our team composition. And of course, getting slots filled and getting more slots for the ANA backstop, I think, is going to be important to our success.
Great. Well, now let's move into lessons learned from across the government. As we mentioned in the bio, you came from NASA most recently, also worked at Department of Energy, and previously worked at USAID. Jami, can you talk a little bit about how you've, how your view of procurement maybe has evolved through those stages, and then any ideas from any of those experiences that you'd like to either pilot or try to bring in or incorporate to your current role with USAID?
No, first of all, I think there's real value in gaining different perspectives from different agencies. We all face a lot of common challenges and issues, and while our missions may differ, our commitment to making life better, kind of writ large, whether it's environmental or energy or national security or in international development, the values and the goals are the same. And procurement and financial assistance is one way that we shape that world. So whether it was EPA, I'm just cutting my teeth and learning the fundamentals of contracting. I'm thankful for that decade working on Energy Star and climate protection and other voluntary partnerships. I learned a lot from that experience. And then coming to USAID and working on special initiatives such as the Administrator's Grant Challenges It was a completely different way of doing business. And I learned a lot from that. And then at DOE, my first time at a cabinet level department and all of the bells and whistles that entails, but also some of the unique and peculiar challenges of working across a very decentralized organization, not unlike USAID in a lot of ways. So, and then of course, my last stint before coming back was at NASA. And at NASA, they clearly have 65 years of a tradition of being innovative. And even before that, when they were the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, they have a rich tradition of trying to problem solve and look at things differently. So USAID is slightly younger than NASA. It's, I think, around 62 years old in our current form. But I want to infuse that spirit of curiosity and innovation into what we do in the A&A space. One way to do this is to make sure that we have our eyes beyond the horizon. At NASA, they embarked on an agency-wide initiative called NASA 2040. It was a cross-agency group that aimed at driving meaningful changes to know, how should the agency be set up and what should they be doing as part of a long-term vision to 2040. I think USAID could benefit from asking similar questions. When we think about mission strategy, how do we make sure that we have an operating model that sets us up to align with our mission goals? How do we have the correct resources, both people, funding, public backing, and legislative support to meet those goals? And then how do we as an organization make sure that what we're doing reflects how impactful and far-reaching and really life-changing our mission is? Clearly, there's overlap in terms of how we benefit humanity between the two agencies, and we do have some interagency agreements there. So I think it's that curiosity and innovation I want to reinvigorate, and I know we have pockets of that throughout USAID, but I want to elevate those and celebrate them and make sure they're shared across the agency. Another thing I learned at being at DOE and at NASA is working with the chief risk officer and their chief program management officer, the importance of risk appetite or tolerance. And USAID, recently issued their risk statement. Obviously, everything we do at USAID and at NASA and every agency has inherent risks, especially given the novelty of some of our requirements that are far-reaching and have big impact. And when there's obviously human life involved. But I want to make sure that our A&A colleagues understand the amount of risk we're willing to accept to achieve our goals. I think there's some trade-offs sometimes that folks are a little apprehensive in making. But I want to make sure that our AOs and COs balance those risks with the impact or the reward. And I want to make sure that from my level and up, that we give them the cover to make those sorts of business decisions and we back them up. So I think that goes a long way. The CEOs and AOs have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. It's a very difficult job. I want to make sure they know that they have the backing of me as the senior procurement executive and our assistant administrator for management, the whole way up to the administrator. So that's something I think we have to have more conversations around, risk and how we do our day-to-day jobs. Another thing I learned in being at very scientific and technical agencies is the idea of setting up room for what I call successful failures, and making sure that our A&A workforce has that space to do that, kind of a lab mentality, right? It's creating a space for innovative risk-taking. We won't talk about the current scheduled launch down in Florida that's been rescheduled, but for example, a rocket may be delayed or not perform as expected in test flights. We still glean a whole bunch of data from those sorts of things, from those failures to improve the next iteration. So in that vein, they're successful. We're still getting data if we didn't achieve the result. So I think turning the lens a little bit and thinking about that in terms of how we try some things different in the acquisition and assistance world. Maybe we try a different approach for solicitations. Maybe we streamline our evaluation factors. It's okay to try something new. That's how we learn and grow. So at NASA, I had the privilege to be the co-executive lead for the Acquisition Innovation Launchpad, as you mentioned in my bio, which we affectionately refer to as the NAIL. And the whole purpose of the NAIL was to empower that culture of innovation and reinforce the idea that anyone, anywhere, can be an innovation champion to promote an idea that will propel us forward. NASA took a broader look beyond A&A and focused on project management. I think we have a lot of large initiatives, especially in the global health and humanitarian assistance arena, where we have the opportunities to strengthen, I think, the program management function. as well at the agency. So having smart program management tools was something that I kind of took away from those experiences, and obviously at DOE with the national labs and the major programs that they do, whether it's supercomputing or nuclear energy, really making sure that program management and contract management are robust skills that the workforce has. The other neat thing about the NAIL at NASA, they had representation from every space flight center and every research center across the country. So it was that broad network that really pulled from diverse geographies, diverse backgrounds, that I think brought about some neat test projects. They had, I think, several dozen, maybe 5 or 6 dozen projects lined up in the first year to kind of pilot and scale. So again, that was something that was exciting, and I want to kind of infuse that here at the agency. They also use more of a scientific method to approach their ANA challenges, which isn't surprising. But they took 5 steps into looking at any sort of acquisition challenge. And the first one was actually interesting. It's not something you normally think of when you're thinking about business acumen, but it was empathy. To empathize and understand the human side of challenges. What is the barrier? What are our pain points that we're experiencing, either internally with the government, externally with our partners or our beneficiaries? What problem are we trying to solve? And of course, the second step is defining that problem, either it's qualitative or quantitative, and really developing metrics around how we're going to measure success. It could be reducing lead time. It could be cost savings or cost avoidance. It could be higher quality deliverables or a greater impact. And then the fun part was the idea generation, really being intentional and aggressive, collaborating with different groups to refine the idea, use a lot of divergent thinking techniques and brainstorming to come up with new and novel ways, or a combination of maybe traditional ways to solve a problem. And then, of course, prototyping, preparing for test cases, just like you would for hardware in flight, and then test and evaluate, and then either scale up or go back to the beginning and start over. So that model of appreciating sort of the data rigor and how we approach our problems, I think is something that we can apply at USAID. But at the end of the day, it was about empowering folks to make changes and take risks, and really also building bridges for industry input. I think we do that quite well at USAID through fora like these and through our industry engagement. But that's my goal here at USAID, to reinvigorate our ANA labs. They've been around a bit. We have them in each region. Our folks in the field and in Washington use it as a platform to bring about some of our creative thinking. As I mentioned before, we have good pockets, and I hear about exciting ideas and things that folks have implemented throughout our footprint, but I want to elevate those and scale them up across the agency. So I think that's something where we have a great opportunity at USAID, given our mission, given our workforce, given our challenges, that we can leverage similar models in that regard.
Well, that's exciting, and we're happy to have them on the show too to highlight any of those pockets of innovation. Jami, of all those points, I'd like to get a little bit deeper into the risk tolerance and how, with an agency as large and decentralized as USAID, maybe not operating in space, but on planet Earth, working all around the world, what are some of the ways that you can encourage either introduce this framework into that agency, or other ways just to encourage more the innovation, the rethinking the relationship with risk tolerance?
Sure. I think a lot of it comes down to messaging and just getting the word out, and through real life lived examples. If someone tries something and it does have, we'll call it a successful failure, that person isn't ostracized, marginalized, or put into a corner where their career is basically at an end. I think that by demonstrating that you can take chances and highlighting those cases where maybe something didn't go right, and really sharing that, having an after action review, highlighting it in our weekly newsletter. Hey, we thought it was going to go this way, but it went that way, and that's okay. We can take chances and we can correct. So I think messaging is a big part of it. I think just socializing the agency's risk tolerance statement, and operationalizing it. How do we get the people doing the day-to-day, how do we get them to understand where the risks are? And then making sure we're working with our legal partners, our friends in budget to make sure that they're aware, if we are taking a risk, what the implications are, and really go in eyes wide open. If we're trying something new, let all the stakeholders know, mission management, bureau management, that, hey, we're going a different approach here. Here's what we expect the benefits to be, but there is a risk that we might not achieve those. But here's how we plan to mitigate that risk. And I think risk mitigation, we talk about mitigation plans a lot in terms of conflict of interest, but I think we also need to have risk mitigation plans. And one way to do that is by not being overly reliant on the same partners over and over, and diversifying our partner base so we have multiple sources, which can work on our benefit. For example, when we do indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity awards, we have a multiple pool of vendors where we might get different technical solutions from a different suite of contractors or partners. So I think there are ways to buy down the risk, and we just need to examine those two and make sure that CEOs are considering all that before they go off and do something new.
Great. Well, these are some interesting ideas from within government. Jami, can you talk a little bit about maybe sources of inspiration or innovation that you look to outside of government for the procurement process?
Sure. So we actually just had a wonderful opportunity for our first time as a USAID management team and MOAA to attend the Procurement Leaders World Congress. We had representatives from about 70 different countries. There were several hundred multinational, mostly private sector firms. And it was really interesting to hear about some of the struggles that they're facing in terms of risk management, supply chain risk management, diversifying their vendors and their partner base so to avoid over-reliance and avoid single points of failure. So it was really interesting. And I welcome those opportunities where we get to stand with our procurement geeks on the other, in the private sector on the other side. While they may sometimes have more resources and be a bit more flexible and nimble given their structure, we can certainly learn a lot from our counterparts that do procurement in the private sector and in academia. I do look to continue to work with MSIs and HBCUs, not only to bring more folks in the door, but also to hear about their concerns. And there are a lot of overlaps between academia and industry and kind of common ground with USAID's mission. We need to explore and exploit those if we're going to work together. So another group of folks that for the first time this summer, we're increasing our contingent to the National Contract Management Association World Congress, which is also a nice mix between industry and government to talk about hot topics and really strengthen the procurement function in our respective organizations. So a lot of opportunity there to learn from our peers, regardless of where they fall on that spectrum.
Well, speaking of hot topics, I'm interested about your take on AI. And if that came up, I imagine that came up at the conference. But how you even just frame your thinking of it, both from the potential benefits, great. Is there a way to scan more proposals or be more fair in whatever piece of the evaluation? But the other side is, can more partners quickly generate a bunch of RFI responses that now your team has to read? So I'm curious to hear a little bit about I imagine it's more just where your thinking's at. I don't think there's any final decisions or anyone knows exactly how this is going to end, but would love to see how you approach or hear about how you approach and frame your thinking on how AI will affect procurement.
Sure. I think it's exciting. I think we need runtime to explore and pilot AI to implement things that humans would otherwise do. For example, one concept that they used at DOE with their small business office is using AI to support addressing policy questions, a chatbot basically to answer common queries. And these are things that are tested with industry. Anytime we go to a commerce site, a chatbot pops up to help us. So it's about adopting some of those tools that are tried and true as kind of getting our feet wet. But there are a myriad of other potential uses using generative AI to help with our requirements definition, synthesizing complex procurement-related information in proposals and applications to help arrive at key decision points, compliance checks on the back end, spend analysis, where's our money going, invoice reviews, category management, fraud detection. The list goes on and on. I think that the A&A function is right for applying these sorts of technologies. We're working closely with our CIO to develop business cases for potential things that we can potentially implement here at USAID. And I did mention, again, this was a major topic at that World Congress. There were a lot of industry partners that were excited and showed some of the ways they were piloting as they face their challenges around supply chains, climate impacts, and making sure that their supplier base is resilient. Taking a step back, though, at the end of the day, our function and our agency is powered by our people. That's our most important asset. But of course, we're going to leverage AI writ large to improve our operations, achieve cost efficiencies. Our overall goal is to be more responsive and increase the decision velocity so that we're making more nimble and flexible decisions to drive development. I think, again, it's an immense opportunity to improve our compliance around any particular federal acquisition regulation or CFR policy or guidance. I think there's room for automated reviews and kind of a recurring scanning of our work products and get away from some of the manual processes that are very time intensive and people intensive. And that can go from pre-award to defining requirements and market research to contract administration all the way through closeout and the acquisition lifecycle. I think it'll help strengthen our internal controls to make sure we're good stewards of the taxpayers' dollar. I also see an opportunity with AI when we're doing our cost price analysis or maybe looking at requirements across awards to see if there are opportunities to leverage best-in-class contracts, other GWACs, GSA schedules, NASA SOUP, to make sure, maybe there's some more competitive pricing we can get on particular awards, or maybe there's quantity discounts that we aren't achieving. Another interesting idea is during contract performance, using this technology to synthesize performance data from our partner base to maybe potentially forecast some issues, whether it's funding gaps, performance delays, and be more proactive about that. But again, at the end of the day, this is all about empowering our workforce to be able to do their jobs better. I know there's trepidation around AI and job replacement. At the end of the day, a contracting officer is a human being, and this will be another tool in our toolbox to make sure that we're arriving to decisions maybe more informed and more quickly, and with more data and kind of trend analysis on our behalf. So there are simple things that we can do and will likely do here in the coming months and years. Process automation that can relieve some of the workload from our staff. The idea is freeing them up from some of the more routine and rote tasks to higher value work, where they could focus on contract administration challenges or getting more out of the partner or site visits, things that have more meaning. This could be as simple as streamlining, responsibility determinations. I know there are products out there, automated bots to compile information on prospective offerers, and the CEO can take that and make a decision with it. If we save 1 hour in that transaction, multiply that across our several hundred across the globe, and that's real savings that'll add up year over year. I'm so very excited. If you can't guess that, I haven't conveyed that. But stepping back a bit, I think we need to think about not only how does AI improve our execution of our current processes, but how can AI change our processes so that we're more efficient and effective? This is going to take some time. It won't be done tomorrow. Good things usually take time and thoughtful implementation. But I think it's important to ask these questions up front so that we can take advantage of these awesome opportunities. If we are continue to be in a constrained environment and don't have the resources to bring on people as we need to, we're going to need to leverage technology to make sure that we're using who we have the best way possible. Philosophically, you need to think about the inputs to these systems. I'll talk maybe a bit later on translation and the importance of that for localization. But language is essential to our human connection. And I think when we're looking at potential AI solutions, we need to embrace multiple models with multiple languages so that we're inclusive and intentional, just with how we structure our use and our architecture and how we integrate AI, whether, or RPA or machine learning into our operations. We need to make sure that we're culturally sensitive and take that into account. And we also need to make sure that we're bringing the workforce along. We need to look at knowledge management and how we share that knowledge across the workforce and across our various regions. Our inputs need to be as diverse as our workforce and take into account those differences. But it really will, I think, unlock potential to solve some of our most difficult challenges. The other guardrail, if you will, I think we need to commit to appropriate moral and just careful and responsible implementation. I know we have the recent executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy development, and use of AI. I think at the end of the day, in collaboration with our CIO and our partners, we need to strike that equilibrium between oversight and transparency as we embrace change to do our jobs better. As you mentioned earlier, there's applications obviously on our partner side, whether it's through looking for business development cases or helping to generate response documents. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to level the playing field too for offerers or applicants that don't necessarily have a whole office of business development folks to write these sorts of things. So I think it will help on both sides of the equation. It's a very exciting time in the A&A world, and I think we're right for adopting these sorts of technologies, again, with the overall goal of empowering our staff and driving down lead times and getting to decisions faster.
And assuming, Jami, thank you for that, that you all, I imagine, maybe piloting some potential applications or testing out some new softwares. So understanding it's a very early stage, are you hopeful, maybe going back to the start about the staffing shortage, are you hopeful that in the short term, whatever the short term is, I don't know, the next fiscal year, that there could be maybe an hour saved here, a couple hours saved here, and now multiply that across all the COs or across all the AOs?
Yes.
Have you seen some things that maybe in yeah,
I think
in the short term, there could be some early wins.
Yes, and we'd be happy to share those early successes. And I think we need those to make the case for further change. So they're definitely on top of mind, and we'll be glad to share what we do implement. Again, resources need to be made available to do these sorts of things. But I think the return on investment will be very high, especially on some of these technologies that are already proven.
Great. Well, let's go to localization then. You talked about translation. Could you take us through a little bit about your thinking on procurement and localization and the Office of Acquisition and Assistance role in the localization initiative?
Sure. So our AOs and COs are on the front lines of localization. Again, we can drive localization because about 85 cents of every dollar that USAID gets goes through our acquisition and assistance mechanisms. So we're very much, in line with our global mission of improving societies and promoting our core American values abroad. One way we do this and attract new partners is through our work with USAID.gov platform. I think it's a great success. It's really the front door for organizations interested in working with USAID. We recently did our sub-opportunities portal, and that's really opening up a window on ways for new partners to get engaged with existing USAID programs. SAM.gov and grants.gov, the government-wide points of entry, aren't always friendly to new eyes. And so our funding feed with work with USAID has tried to simplify and streamline how potential partners can search, identify, and respond to funding opportunities. For those that are very new and have never worked with USAID or a government agency, we have a sort of pre-engagement assessment and resource library to identify organizations' capacity and gives them the tools to build their capacity. But really, the reach of work with USAID is pretty impressive. We have over 6,700 organizations in our partner directory. 67% of those are local partners. So USAID can identify those partners in local communities. So we're encouraging our staff to use that information and data as they look at requirements locally in country. But the big exciting news, and we mentioned translation, the whole platform is now available in Arabic, French, and Spanish. So we've vastly increased our reach to local partners. I believe we had close to 1,500 new users on the Arabic website in the last couple of weeks. So we're hoping that by using the language where we operate, we're bringing critical material to new partners. We're removing a major barrier for them and providing a model for quite frankly, other government agencies that do international work. Another approach we're taking just to widen that language lens, if we're going to change how we meet localization, we need to be able to post solicitations and accept responses in languages other than English. So we do have a translation program, a blanket purchase agreement that offers these high quality translations of some of our operational policy, our ADS, and our RFAs, RFIs, NOFOs, and our local partners applications. So CEOs have made awards with these translated documents in a number of countries. And I think that's an important way to drive localization. When we were in Kigali, Rwanda for our Africa regional A&A workshop in February, we had a number of CEOs highlight localization projects that were a success and share those successes across the continent. So I think continuing to beat that drum of successful projects and letting folks know what different approaches people took. In this case, it was a co-creation workshop to bring new partners. I think that's very important in driving that localization. We have a very ambitious goal, aspirational, some might say, but every transaction offers an opportunity to bring in local partners, and our CEOs and AOs are on the front lines of that.
Could you share that example, Jami, or another one of something of successful of what successful localization looked like with USAID? I think you mentioned it was a co-creation workshop that was.
Yes, it was a co-creation workshop around a marginalized segment of society. It is resource intensive. It takes a lot of people, and it takes a lot of time to be bringing local partners in. But that's why we need to leverage those technologies and staff up so that we can do more of it. Another example, one mission in Africa has they've set up a whole localization unit within OAA where they're using their FSNs to outreach and make connections with local organizations, nonprofits, local academic institutions. So they've set up the architecture as kind of a welcome mat of their own at the mission. And their localization numbers are looking pretty strong because they've taken that extra step of engaging directly with local partners. So I think there's room for more of that across missions. Again, this mission had the luxury of having the resources to do it. Not everyone has the resources, but I think it's that engagement, that field engagement of surveying the marketplace, knowing who the actors are at the lowest level is what gets people in the door. And we can make those matches with USAID and particular requirements, whether it's a grant or cooperative agreement or an actual contract award.
Great. Now, maybe going a little bigger picture, you talked about partners and input from the partners and localization. There's also the new partnerships initiative and a large group of established partners. How do you look at the partnering landscape with USAID in terms of what USAID needs and the market and the industry need to best achieve their goals? And obviously there's OSDBU with small businesses, again, new partnerships initiative, localization, all the established primes and other subcontractors. I'd be curious about how you look at that partnering community.
Sure. I think we need any and all of the above. We're always going to need some of our traditional IDIQs and other larger awards. But on the other end, we're going to need smaller localization awards. We're trying to address this on several fronts. Just with regard to localization, we recently revised our non-US organization pre-award survey, which we affectionately call NUPAS, to try to right-size pre-award surveys to minimize burden. So if we're talking on that local end, sometimes smaller dollar awards, there's that. We heard voices from inside and outside the agency that we needed to tailor that survey to balance risk. But there's room at the table for everyone, traditional, non-traditional, new partners. We do track new entrants as part of our government-wide metrics for acquisition. So that's something that we're looking at. We obviously look at small business goals and opportunities, especially around small disadvantaged businesses. So USAID has enough funding, $38 billion last year, that we're going to need multiple players, multiple types of contracts, multiple types of financial assistance. So there's plenty of work to go around the literal world. And they're all valuable tools. We just need to make sure we're making the right decision on, acquisition strategy, contract type, award type, and then the terms and conditions we put in. At the end of the day, all of this is about relationship management. The contract or the grant is the legal tool we use, but we need to make sure that we're building relationships with all types of partners in all corners of the globe.
And then what about the partners? How can they help you? What are constructive or effective ways to provide feedback on what's working well, maybe suggestions of things to try out? Obviously, you don't want to get bombarded with 1,000 emails, but what's a good way? I guess, Jami, two things. One, a channel to share it with you or your team. And then how do they best phrase it? Here's the idea, here's the innovation, here's the ADAR that it relates to, or what's the most effective way for them to share that input with you and your team?
That's a great question. So industry liaison at usaid.gov. They get a number of emails a day, our great team with Matt Johnson and folks. That's your best avenue if you have an idea to float. And the more specificity you can provide, the better. Now, sometimes we get lines of inquiry there particular to a procurement, and of course we redirect back to the contracting officer, or if it's a small business to OSDBU or our ombuds person, if there's a performance issue or some sort of grievance. So we have a number of avenues, but industry liaison at usa.gov, and we'll funnel the request. But if partners can be very specific about what the issue is, and offer some level of granularity, that'll help us, whether it's a policy issue we need to look into, whether it's operational, a CO specific issue. We're more than happy to take that input. Again, the idea is to make us stronger, make us better and more responsive. So industry liaison at usa.gov. Another great venue is to attend our business forecast calls quarterly. There's a lot of information there. Last quarter, we had 2,000 questions. Now, obviously, we don't go through all of those during the webinar, but we do post those. It's a lot of work on our side to get you that accurate information, but I think that's another avenue of engagement. And then we recently had our Reverse Industry Day, which is a great event where we hear from our partner associations, directly from partners about what's working and what ideas they have to make things better. So we have a couple different ways, and that list wasn't exhaustive, but I think those are the main ways that we engage with industry, and it makes life better for everyone when we do that. It really is a best practice.
I'll just throw out another resource that I think is great that that your team created, was the LinkedIn group Work with USAID. Yes. I haven't checked recently. I think it's in the six figures, the number of members.
Yes, I think we have. Yes, we have hundreds of thousands of members.
Hundreds of thousands, yeah.
Yes, that is a very active group. I'll be posting something later today there. But yes, it's a very engaged group, and that's another avenue where we've really increased our reach. We'll share statistics in our next annual report, but that has really ramped up the number of partners that work with USA.gov. We're really excited that folks are so passionate and engaged around USAID's mission.
Yeah. And then you'd mentioned new partners. Are there any numbers you're able to share at this point in terms of the number of new partners or the data on the new partners that have come in? Obviously not putting you on the spot, Jami, but if there are any, it would be great to hear that. If not, of course, when they're ready, it'd be great to hear them.
So we will give you the exact figure in our annual report, but anecdotally, it's several hundred partners over the last 2 years. So I don't have the exact number, so I'm hesitant to give you that, but we have added partners. And again, we rank that across the CFO Act agencies in terms of new entrants. It's something that's important to this administration, again, to diversify our partner base. So we'll be happy to follow up with specifics on that.
Excellent. Yeah, but that's several hundred in the hundreds of new partners over the last few years that have started working with USAID. That's great. A couple of things I wanted to get to before you get back to your very important work. What's next? What's next for your team through the end of this fiscal year? What are you all really prioritizing and focusing on? We have all these different things, from new technologies to assess, to rolling out some ideas from within other government agencies and from outside of government, and then just working with the team to roll out with the ANA lab, or to reinvigorate the ANA labs. Can you talk about what you're really excited about and prioritizing through the end of this fiscal year?
Sure. Well, number one, our day job is to get the work done, to get the dollars obligated. We have a number of very large, high visibility awards that we need to make sure that we get done. So that operational goal obviously is something that we're tracking closely. But you did mention the ANA labs, and that is a priority. As I mentioned, I want to kind of reinvigorate those. Our labs work with operational COs to identify needs, whether it's more guidance, to tweak templates or samples. So that's something that we're doing on an ongoing basis that we'll focus on for the rest of the fiscal year and beyond. Our work is dynamic, and so we can't rest on our laurels just when we think we have the perfect template or memo or approach. We need to constantly look at it to see if there's something better. And one way we do that is by benchmarking with other agencies. I plan on continuing to engage with my peers across government, the other senior procurement executives and chief acquisition officers on the Chief Acquisition Officer Council. There's a lot of sharing that goes on there. And we recently started attending the financial assistance version of that panel to talk about how to streamline financial assistance and make sure that we're doing things more efficiently across government. So that's on our kind of priority list to engage, obviously with OMB and OFPP on workforce matters. But back to the labs, we recently released guidance on oral presentations and contracts with award fees. and renewal awards and fixed amount awards. We talked about those, and we talk about those in the context of localization to use fixed amount awards to lower the burden on potential new partners. So we're focusing on releasing guidance like that to make CEOs kind of job aids for their day-to-day work. And then I'm going to continue to focus on looking at those best practices and developing guidelines so that the entire workforce can adopt anything that's kind of innovative and yielding results. But really, I want to leverage that. We have a couple ANA labs that are convening Asia, and I believe we're going to do a meeting in Latin America to highlight the role that those folks play in making sure that we're doing the best we can in our work. So I want to leverage that peer-led network, make sure we have voices from all the regions to make us stronger. So really, number one, getting those dollars obligated, but making sure that we're continuously improving how we do that. And the end goal, of course, is to be more impactful with our international development, and contracts and grants are just happen to be the tools we use to make that impact.
Great. Well, Jami, as we get close to wrapping up, are there any other things that you want to share with our audience, with the partnering community, and with maybe your colleagues at USAID or the everyone listening from other donor agencies around the world?
Sure. I did want to highlight recently, in the spirit of burden busting, that we worked with OMB to kind of clarify and simplify the requirements around financial assistance, again, to reduce burden. So if folks haven't heard, these changes will officially take effect in October, but we have some flexibility around the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov flexibility. So foreign entities, less than $500,000 awards, there are exceptions there. This is kind of getting in the weeds, but the de minimis rate for financial assistance has increased from 10 to 15%. That'll allow partners to recover costs better. And then that language accessibility that I talked about, it'll officially be in the CFR that we can accept non-English languages, reports, and other documentation and other than English. So I did want to highlight we're excited about that recent development. We're working to finalize our implementation plan with the goal of that being in effect the beginning of FY25. So that's something that I wanted to highlight as well. I think that'll help us bring more partners to the table as well.
Great. And then to wrap up, I like to ask, so what? So for the partners, after listening to this, they go back to their jobs, either maybe on the business development teams preparing for proposals, or on the project implementation teams, or on the compliance teams. What's the so what? What's a key takeaway that you'd like them to take with them as they go into implementing and supporting USAID's critical mission around the world?
It's a great question. I think the main takeaway is we don't do our work alone. Our partners, our global team, what we do each and every day is a team sport, and we need players from all over to make an impact. I talk a lot about core values. Respect and inclusivity are at the heart of what we do in MOAA and at USAID. We have a wonderfully diverse team of unique individuals with different educational backgrounds, abilities, and ideas. And our global challenges are going to require that diversity of humanity to solve them. So it's through a culture of inclusion and respect that we can do this. And the same goes for our partners. We rely on our partners' insights and abilities so that we can implement worldwide. So I like to talk, and I'm quick to talk in pretty quick areas, but listening and collaboration and empathy are also at the core of how we form these relationships. They really underpin the trust and the procurement integrity of our ANA awards. I've said it to my team when we had our all hands here in Washington. I said it in Kigali when we had our 200 AOs and COs, but USAID is the premier development agency in the world because of our workforce and our partners. Our ANA team is going to be the premier enabler of that mission. So I'm excited for our future and our collective journey ahead. As I sign off my weekly newsletters, I always say onward and upward we go together, and I really mean that. It is a sentiment I borrowed from a prior position, but it is true. We can't do it unless we do it together. So I'm just very proud of the team and what they've been able to accomplish, given the challenges that we face, and it's an honor to represent them today.
Well, Jami, thank you, and a sincere thank you to your team as well for the important work you do. Thanks for taking some time to come on the Aid Market Podcast today to share the important work with the partnering community. It was great to have you on here. I learned a lot today. So yeah, with that, thank you very much, and
And I want to thank you. Sure. I want to thank you for helping people connect with USAID, and I thank the listeners for spending some time with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Jami. Well, have a great day. And yeah, we'll be in touch maybe later this year down the road to see how everything pans out. And we'll be happy to continue to share and amplify all the reports and updates that come out of your office.
Great. I look forward to it. Thanks again, Mike.
All right. Have a great day.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Aid Market Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and connect with Mike Shanley on LinkedIn to stay updated on the latest USAID funding trends.